Prince Harry has met his father, King Charles, for the first time in 19 months.
There's a lot to be discussed, and I really hope that they are willing to sit down. I don't know how staying silent is ever going to make things better. There's a lot that can happen between now.
The door did not close quietly. It closed with the weight of royal authority behind it, and every person in that palace knew the sound was final. Charles had refused Meghan's plea for a path back toward the family, not postponed it, not softened it, not asked her to wait for a better moment. He had refused it. The statement carried the language of permanence, and those who understood how the monarchy communicated knew immediately that this was not a pause dressed up in formal phrasing. This was the institution drawing a line it had no intention of crossing again. Before we move deeper into what this decision truly cost each person involved, a brief note. This video draws on publicly available reporting and commentary. Some details, particularly those concerning private conversations and internal palace discussions, remain unverified and are presented here for discussion and context only. Now, if you follow royal news and you are not yet subscribed to this channel, please do so now. We cover every significant development as it happens, and this story is far from over. Meghan received the answer before the public did. That was how the palace managed these moments. A private channel, meaning a controlled line of communication used to deliver sensitive decisions before they reached the press, was used to ensure she had minutes to absorb the rejection before the world began forming opinions about it. Those minutes did not help. She read the response once and found no comfort in the wording. She read it again and found something worse: clarity. The reply left no soft corner, no phrase that could be held up and interpreted as anything other than what it was. The formal request for renewed access, for selected invitations, for a quiet signal that the freeze around her name had finally begun to thaw. It had been denied across every point she had raised. What made this harder to absorb was that Meghan had not asked to return as a full working royal, meaning a senior member of the family expected to carry out official duties on behalf of the crown. She had asked for something considerably smaller in scope, but emotionally enormous in meaning. Controlled appearances, selected family moments, a single public sign that the distance was not permanent. The palace had heard that request and answered it with language built to end the matter entirely. No future attendance at family-linked events under palace approval. No internal palace contact. No symbolic restoration, meaning no public gesture of any kind that she had been welcomed back into the royal circle. Whatever she had hoped the request might open, the response had sealed it instead. And yet the real reason Charles refused her had not begun with the letter she sent. It had begun far earlier, in a room most people would never see, during a moment that shifted the palace's posture from measured distance into something colder. To understand why the rejection landed the way it did, the story must travel backward before it can move forward, because this was never simply about one plea. It was about everything that plea carried with it. The Windsor Remembrance Reception, according to accounts that later reached senior royal review, was supposed to be exactly what such gatherings were meant to be: a private moment of family solidarity following a solemn public ceremony, where grief and duty sat together in a room shielded from cameras and public commentary. It was reportedly in this setting, according to sources cited in palace accounts at the time, that something shifted irrevocably. Meghan had reportedly been left out of a family balcony appearance. It's a public moment in which selected members of the royal family stand together above the crowd as a visible declaration of unity and belonging. A balcony place was never merely a position to stand in. It carried a message that the public read without needing it explained. To be absent from it was to be told in front of the world, where the lines had been drawn. Meghan reportedly felt the exclusion keenly and made that feeling known to palace aides after the reception. According to sources familiar with the incident, she pressed for an explanation, demanding to understand why she had been removed from a moment she believed still touched her in some essential way. William was present during at least part of this exchange, and those who witnessed it later described the atmosphere as deeply uncomfortable. The prince had carried years of public tension with composure, but this moment felt qualitatively different to him. It had occurred in the aftermath of a solemn ceremony, where restraint was not merely expected, but owed to the occasion itself. He reportedly watched the exchange intensify, saw a palace aide step away visibly shaken, and drew his own conclusions. What William is said to have seen was not a woman asking for fairness. It was, in his reading, proof that image and position remained dangerously close to every tension the family carried. Charles reportedly observed the exchange from across the room, according to accounts later placed into a confidential internal file, meaning a restricted record prepared for senior royal review. The king did not intervene immediately. He watched, and in that watching, according to sources who have spoken to journalists covering the palace, he reached a conclusion that would follow him all the way to the day he signed the rejection. The private gathering had been intended to let grief soften old bitterness. Instead, he watched resentment surface in the very room meant to quiet it. The file that documented the Windsor incident reportedly included a direct account of words Meghan was said to have spoken during the confrontation. The phrase cited in multiple accounts was, "You cannot erase me and expect silence." Palace sources who reviewed the file later noted that those words unsettled the household considerably. The sentence sounded, to those who heard it, less like pain expressing itself and more like a warning being issued. Whether Meghan intended it that way remains disputed. What is not disputed is that the phrase followed the file all the way to Charles's desk, and that when he read it again, alongside her final plea, the two documents did not sit comfortably together. So when her formal request for renewed access finally arrived, it did not arrive alone. It arrived carrying the echo of the night Windsor changed everything. Charles had called a private meeting before the decision was announced, a closed discussion with only trusted figures present, meaning the kind of gathering where royal choices are shaped before they become public record. That mattered because even a whisper of what was being decided could become a headline before the family had agreed on anything. It also mattered because the meeting was not convened to debate the question at length. The question had, in many ways, already been answered by the Windsor incident. The meeting was convened to agree on language, and language, inside the palace, was everything. William was present. He had positioned himself near the window, according to reconstructed accounts based on sources familiar with the meeting, and he remained largely quiet until the wording itself became the point of contention. Charles reportedly hesitated over the word rejected. The king understood its cruelty. It was blunt, final, and offered Meghan no soft place to land. William's response to that hesitation, according to those familiar with the discussion, was not impassioned. It was measured, and for that reason more difficult to argue against. Softer language, the prince reportedly argued, would create false hope, and false hope had already cost the family more than it could afford to spend again. William reminded Charles, according to accounts that have since circulated among royal commentators, that Catherine had endured years of public pressure without converting private pain into public confrontation. He reminded him of the children, of how many times the next generation had been drawn into storms they had never chosen and could never fully escape. His concern was not revenge. His position, according to those present, was more fundamental than that. The monarchy could not keep reopening the same door, simply because the pain outside it had not faded. Every time that door had been nudged open in recent years, something had found its way through and wounded the institution all over again. William did not raise his voice. He simply made it clear that sentiment was not a governing principle. And Charles, reading the same fear in his son's careful words, understood why the future king would not shift. Camilla was not present at the final deliberation, according to accounts of the meeting's composition, and that absence said something that her presence might not have. She had reportedly made her position clear to Charles in the days before the decision was formalized. She supported the rejection, but she carried a quiet concern about what might follow it. The Queen Consort had survived enough royal turbulence to understand the particular danger of a wounded person with nothing left to lose. That concern, however, was not enough to change the outcome. The choice had settled between the king and the heir, and once those two men had arrived at the same conclusion, the deliberation was effectively over. Charles removed his reading glasses at some point during the meeting. The room reportedly changed at that moment, in the way that rooms do when a decision that has been resisted finally stops being resisted. He did not look like a man who had won something. According to accounts of those present or briefed afterward, he looked like a man accepting a cost he had not wanted to pay. Meghan's plea had reached him as a request for return. But inside the room, it also arrived carrying the full weight of everything that had preceded it. The accusations, the silences, the public statements, the broken attempts at private repair. He understood what reopening palace communication access would mean, permission to speak through protected royal channels, to exist again inside the formal structures of the family. And the monarch no longer believed that path could be reopened without the damage returning with it. The king looked down at the file and said, according to sources who have described the moment to journalists, a single short sentence, then we close it. An aide moved before anyone else did. He produced a draft palace statement that had already been prepared. That gesture did not go unnoticed. Charles saw it, William saw it. The quiet efficiency of it told the room something that no one was prepared to say aloud. Someone had anticipated the outcome before the king had voiced it. The statement was precise, controlled, and constructed to foreclose further discussion. Meghan would not be named with cruelty, but she would be denied with absolute certainty. And the speed with which the machinery moved, once Charles had spoken, made clear that this was no ordinary family refusal. This was royal authority operating at a register that left no room for misinterpretation. The palace machinery, meaning the private offices, senior aides, and communications staff who convert a royal decision into an official public message, moved with uncommon speed once the decision had been confirmed. That speed was itself a signal. Hesitation would invite leaks, leaks would invite the kind of media pressure the palace had spent years trying to manage. The decision had been made inside a sealed room, and the institution wanted to control how it emerged before anyone could shape the story first. A firm confirmation had been approved, not a vague family statement. Everyone around the king understood the difference between those two things. A vague statement could be read in multiple directions. The one Charles had approved was built to close every available reading down to one. Meghan received the palace's formal response through that private channel before the confirmation reached the wider press. She had minutes, not hours, to absorb what had been written before the world began consuming it. Those minutes, according to accounts of the period immediately following the decision, did not offer her anything resembling composure. She read the reply and reportedly gripped the edge of the table as she reached the passage that removed each option one by one. No future royal attendance, no internal palace contact, no symbolic restoration of any kind. She did not cry immediately. That was what made the moment, in Harry's later recounting of events, feel more serious than tears would. The shock settled on her face and then went still, hardening into something colder as each line removed another possibility she had allowed herself to consider. Harry watched her read and understood the damage before she spoke. He had seen Meghan angry and he had seen her hurt, but the silence he witnessed in that moment concerned him more than either. He asked, according to accounts of the period, whether there was someone he could still call. Charles, a senior aide, anyone who might explain the specific wording or offer some path through it. Meghan did not answer immediately. That silence told him what he needed to know. One phrase in the statement reportedly stopped her entirely. The family position is settled. Those 4 words carried more authority than anything else in the document, because they did not sound like Charles alone. They sounded like Charles and William together, the king's authority expressed through the heir's restraint, the monarchy's present and future speaking in the same controlled breath. Harry reportedly saw Meghan's eyes stop on that sentence, and he understood in that moment that this was not the response of one man in a room making a difficult call. This was the institution closing its formal structures around a decision that more than one person had shaped. No further appeals, no further channels, no one remaining to persuade. Harry lowered his voice, but Meghan had already moved past the question of what he might do next. She could call, but calling would not reopen what had been sealed. She could speak publicly, but speaking publicly would only confirm what the palace had anticipated. For the first time in the long arc of this rupture, she seemed to understand, according to sources close to those around her at the time, that the door had not been shut in rage. It had been closed with method, and that distinction was, in some ways, harder to bear than anger would have been. Anger could be argued with, method simply endured. Before the decision became public property, there was reportedly one more moment between Charles and Meghan, a private telephone call without aides present on either side, conducted after the formal response had already been delivered. A private call in this context meant a direct conversation outside the palace communication system. No scripted phrases, no carefully positioned advisors, no translation layer between what was felt and what was said. That mattered because the formal rejection had been written in institutional language that gave Meghan no way to respond to Charles as a person rather than a subject. The call, according to sources who have spoken about it subsequently, gave her that opening. Whether it helped is another question. Meghan reportedly answered the call with composure. She did not begin with accusations or grievances. She asked Charles one question directly: whether there had ever been a version of her return that he could have accepted. Charles paused before answering, according to those familiar with the call. That pause, which reportedly lasted several seconds, communicated more than whatever followed it. Meghan is said to have understood the answer before the king found words for it. Charles told her, according to accounts of the call, that trust could not be rebuilt by announcement. In this context, trust meant something very specific, not forgiveness and not affection, but confidence that private family pain would not be converted into public pressure again. The monarch told her that he no longer had that confidence. He did not say it with anger. He reportedly spoke like a man who had reached the end of a long process, not like a man who had found satisfaction in arriving there. He said, according to sources who have recounted the call, "This is not punishment, it is protection." Those words revealed the frame the palace had placed around its decision. This was not the monarchy expressing revenge. It was the monarchy drawing a protective line around William, Catherine, the children, and the institutional calm the family had worked to reconstruct. Charles had absorbed personal loss to hold that line, and that absorption left him, by most accounts, burdened rather than vindicated. Meghan did not press again. The moment the call changed was when she reportedly told the king that she understood what the family had chosen. Those words, understated and final, carried the weight of a plea, surrendering its last breath. Charles heard the quiet in her voice and, by all accounts, knew the damage was permanent. Meghan heard the firmness in his and knew no further conversation would alter it. For a brief and unwitnessed moment, the wound and the crown had spoken to each other directly. No machinery between them, no polished language to soften what was real. Charles ended the call, knowing that the courtesy he had offered had not changed the outcome. Meghan ended it, knowing that dignity was the only thing she had left to protect. And once that call ended, the institution could no longer contain what it had decided inside private rooms and sealed files. By morning, Britain knew. Front pages carried a single phrase that the country repeated before most people had finished their first cup of tea. Palace door closed. King ends, Meghan return. The words differed slightly depending on the publication, but the meaning was uniform. The rejection had moved from internal palace decision to national fact, and it had done so with a speed that told its own story. The palace had not chased the coverage. It had allowed the confirmation to speak, and then it had remained quiet, understanding, as institutions of long experience tend to, that silence after a firm statement is its own form of authority. Charles reportedly watched some of the morning coverage before turning the television off. He did not watch long. The public framing of the decision, which reduced years of accumulated tension into a single dramatic sentence, made private pain into national spectacle in a way the king had understood was coming, but had not been fully prepared for. He grasped why the story held the country so tightly. It was not only about Meghan, it was about whether a monarchy could refuse reconciliation without appearing cruel, and whether a king could protect his institution without surrendering what remained of his family. Charles had made the decision. The coverage reminded him that no royal choice, however carefully managed in the room where it was taken, remained private for long. Meghan saw the headlines and looked away. She had known the answer was final before the press confirmed it, but reading it printed in the language of public record made the wound land differently. The coverage did not hold her grief. It held the drama. It turned her private disappointment into something that strangers debated between trains. At Victoria Station, one of London's busiest transport hubs, where thousands of ordinary commuters pass through before the city has fully woken, a newspaper board displayed the words before the palace had issued a second syllable. People stopped, some photographed it, most moved on. That was the particular cruelty of public history. One family's fracture becoming something passers-by could absorb between one train and the next, and then forget by lunchtime. Outside Buckingham Palace, the monarch's central working residence and the building that functions in the public imagination as the physical heart of the monarchy, a small crowd gathered at the railings. Some stood quietly, some filmed. One woman, captured briefly on broadcast footage, looked toward the gates and said only, "That sounded final." It did. Meghan had been denied. Charles had stood firm. William's influence had moved through every line of the statement without appearing in any of them, and the palace had chosen to let the silence around its decision do the work that further comment could only complicate. What remained, once the public noise had begun to settle, was the internal reckoning, the emotional cost that could not be measured in headlines or broadcast panels, the weight each person now carried forward from the moment the decision was made. Charles bore the heaviest share. The king had chosen the crown over another fragile attempt at compromise, public royal responsibility, meaning the duty to protect the monarchy's image, order, and long-term stability, even when personal emotion pulls against it, had demanded that he refuse Meghan's plea rather than risk what reopening that door might release. He had known, when he signed the file, that rejecting her meant pushing Harry further from the family. He had made that calculation, sitting alone with the signed documents afterward. According to those who know him well, he did not look like a man who had exercised power cleanly. He looked like a father who had accepted a loss he would carry for the remainder of his reign. He placed the file into a drawer and rested his hand on it for a moment, not in triumph and not with relief. William carried something different. The contained weight of a man who had done what he believed was necessary and had been right about why it was necessary, but who understood that being right and being whole were not the same thing. The prince had shaped the outcome without ever forcing his father's hand. He had simply made the cost of the alternative visible. His influence was not anger, it was architecture. And that architecture had been accepted. The future of the monarchy had shaped the decision of the present monarch, and that shift in itself was significant. William was no longer merely reacting to royal crises after they erupted, he was determining how they ended. Meghan accepted the truth in stages, and that slow absorption was where the deepest pain lived. She had known the plea was her final attempt. She had understood, before she sent it, that rejection was possible. But possibility and reality are different rooms, and moving from one into the other takes time that no amount of preparation shortens. Her story would continue, outside palace walls, on her own terms, in the spaces where royal permission carried no authority. But the sanctioned path back into the family's formal world, the path that would have allowed her to exist again within the palace's approved structures, had been permanently sealed. She had not been erased, but she had been formally excluded. And in the monarchy's language, that distinction, though real, did not feel like mercy. Harry stood where he had always stood during this long rupture between the life he had chosen and the family he had come from, with neither side able to fully reach him across the distance. The rejection had not diminished Meghan in public life, but it had ended any remaining institutional possibility of return, and Harry understood what that meant for the shape of his own place in the world. He could not stand fully inside a family whose institution had drawn that line. He could not fully leave, because lineage does not dissolve by decision. He remained where he had always been, between love and lineage, with the door now formally closed behind him. The monarchy had made its choice, not from cruelty, though the effect could feel like it, not from weakness, though the cost was real. The palace had chosen closure over further compromise, discipline over the exhausting drama of reopening old wounds, and institutional survival over the sentiment that says broken things can always be mended if both parties are willing. Some broken things cannot. Some decisions, once made and confirmed and announced from front pages, settle into permanence, not because no one grieved them, but because the grief was accepted as the price of moving forward. The door was closed. Charles felt it. William knew it. Meghan heard it. Harry would carry it. And the monarchy moved on, as monarchies always have, carrying its losses inward and showing the world only its composure. Thank you for watching. If this video gave you something to think about, please leave a like and make sure you are subscribed and turn on notifications so you never miss our next one. We will see you very soon.